Great. So, good morning once again, and a very warm welcome to Cigna Healthcare's sessions. Uh, I call it the patient safety because that's why we exist. Hospitals, healthcare, all healthcare professionals, all hospital staff, we all are focused on ensuring that our patients go home without any additional harm. They should get healed and go home. And that's why we try to dedicate some time throughout the year discussing patient safety. And this week we have the right reason for doing so. That is Patient Safety Awareness Week, March 12 to 18. And thank you for being here. Once again, I am requesting everyone, please mute your microphone, keep your video off. And in case you have any questions during the session, you may send it by chat box or you wait to the session to ask the questions. So this is our patient safety 3 events. Today we have Madam Sushila Samuel with us. Tomorrow we have Dr. Vijay George, and on 17th, I'll be taking the treatment. So it gives me absolute pleasure, and honor to welcome Ms.Sushila Samuel. She's one person that I have really looked up to, and she had been with Arjo Huntley for the last 20 years. Many of you must be knowing her, and I have known her for some years, and from the time of Fortis, I have known her, and I always remember her as very energetic, very passionate, and very focused on finding answers, finding things. And she's an alumni of SNDT, BSc, and MSc from there, and she had been a nursing. But I remember her as the clinical head of Arjo Huntley for the last 20 years, and she is continuing to go strong. And this just happened that the other day we were talking, and then she mentioned about this new technology where we can find pressure ulcers even before they really happen. It's kind of a technology sense that helps you to know. So I got very excited. I said, I have to invite you to our patient safety week, and she so kindly accepted. Thank you so much, Ms. Sushila. May I ask you to come on the video, please?
Yeah, I think I'm already on video.
No, now you are on video.
Yeah, okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that is Ms. Sushila Samuel for all of us. And thank you so much for taking time out for being here. And the session is aptly, termed as identifying pressure ulcers before it happens in technology. And objectives are there in front of you. And I would say, in summary, learning that how can we, use technology for advantage. And I'm very sure since COVID came, you have seen lots of technology that is changing. And I personally believe that we have to catch up with technology. Technology should help nurses to do the delivery of care without much delay and as quickly as possible. And pressure ulcers or pressure injury, hapu, whatever you call it, is definitely something we all are struggling to prevent. And let's now listen to Ms.Sushila for what she wants to tell us today. And before I sign off, let me just quickly show you that tomorrow we have Dr. Vijay George doing a session on leadership at 11 a.m. And this is specifically designed for leaders, at least units in charges and above. I have no problem if staff nurses join, it's not a problem, but the topic may not be immediately relevant to you. Staffing challenges and innovative thinking. And on the, can I ask everyone to mute yourself, please? Very, very important to make yourself muted so we can listen to our speaker without any disturbance, right? So join us tomorrow, and that's it for now. And thank you so much. And let me stop sharing and allow Ma'am Sushila to share the screen and start. If someone is not muting themselves after repeated request, I will be forced to remove them. So please don't force me to do that. Thank you very much. Yes, Ma'am Sushila, we can see your screen.
All right. Is that fine? I put it on
Yes.
presentation.
Yes, yes. Just give me 1 second, ma'am. Let me mute everyone and then you can mute yourself. I'll just. Yes, ma'am, Sushila, I think we are good to go.
Okay. Thank you, Tangam, for that introduction, and thank you for inviting me and having me over. It's indeed a pleasure. When it comes to anything related to pressure injury, I'm very passionate about it because, this is a topic I've been talking since last 20 years. Obviously, this is a topic very dear to my heart, and I am very passionate about it. All right. So today, you've seen some of the objectives which I had put up, but today's session, we will be mainly discussing on pressure injury, how it's an ongoing challenge for all of us. We'll understand the damage cascade. This is something new, so we'll understand the whole damage cascade and what is subepidermal moisture. We will look at some of the limitations of our current tools that we have. And I've introduced to you a Provisio SEM scanner for PI risk assessment. So, and I have a video at the end to play where you understand, how do we do the scanning. So we start off. Now, as you know, pressure injury is a challenge. Whenever we are talking about pressure injury, we always say that it is a challenge. It is an ongoing challenge, and it is, always there, and we are always worried about it. So just to review or just to get in context, I'm sure all of you know, but what is pressure injury? Now, the definitions of pressure injury, if you would remember, keeps changing. And, we've had many definitions of but the latest guideline or the latest definition says that it is an injury, it is a localized damage to the skin and or the underlying tissue, which is as a result of pressure or pressure in combination with shear. The latest guideline is emphasizing also that it occurs over bony prominences mainly, and also it can be related to medical or any other. So they are talking about device-related injuries also. Now,
ওখানে পেশেন্ট ডোমেস্টিক কল করে অ্যাডমিশন হয়েছে আমাদের
can you please mute your mics?
এইচডিউতে রঞ্জিতা ফল রিস্ক অ্যাসেসমেন্টটা ভুল করেছে 16 করেছে বিকজ ডায়াগনোসিস ডিউ টু ফল বলে 5 হয় না গেটের মধ্যে, তো ওটা করেনি।
Dolly, please keep yourself muted. Please don't unmute yourself.
Okay, fine. So pressure injury, as you know, is as a result of body weight forces or external forces, or it may be related, as I just said, to any other any medical or any other devices. Now, generally, they present as an intact skin or as an open wound. When I talk about intact skin, it may be in terms of erythema or redness. And tissue damage usually occurs as a result of intense or prolonged exposure to sustained deformations, compressions, tension, shear, or it may be a combination of all these factors. And as you know, there are many contributing factors. One of the primary causes or primary reasons we say is impaired mobility. That becomes one of the primary reasons for, it to develop. Okay. Now, there are many factors, as we said, which makes people or which makes a person susceptible to pressure injury. Now, we talk about two things mainly. One is we say mechanical boundary condition, and the other we say is tissue tolerance of an individual. Now, both these factors will determine, when we are talking about mechanical boundary conditions, we are mainly talking about the magnitude and time or the duration of the loads and their mode of action. So that's what we talk about mechanical boundary condition. And when we talk about tissue tolerance, or we talk about tissue tolerance of an individual, it is basically the internal anatomy, tissue morphology, the thermal properties, all these together. So when we're talking, when we're talking about factors, we basically divide them into these two: mechanical boundary condition which is mainly the magnitude and time of the action, the pressure or the shear. And when we are talking about tissue tolerance, it's more internal, the internal morphology. Both these play a very important role. And when we are looking at mechanical loading, I said it's mainly magnitude and duration. So we have many causes. We talk about pressure, which we say is a perpendicular force. We talk of shear, which is parallel moving. We talk of friction, which is lateral movement. And we also talk of microclimate management, which is basically temperature and moisture. So these are all some of the causes or factors which influence a patient, a person to develop or which influence in the development of pressure injury. How big is the problem? Okay, now when we look at how big is a problem, now how do we, how do we look at our patients or residents in our care? Now, in Arjo, we have something called as a mobility gallery. When we look at a mobility gallery, we try and identify, where is our patient when we look at the mobility gallery. So, we call it Albert, Barbara, Carl, Doris and Emma. So A, B, C, D, E. So when we're looking at Albert, that is the first person here. Now, if you see his mobility is restricted, that he is using a walking stick and walking. And then when you look at Barbara, she's using a walker. When you look at Carl, he's sitting on a wheelchair, but he's maneuvering the wheelchair by himself. And when you look at Doris, she can sit on a wheelchair, but she needs to be pushed or she may be on the bed. And when we look at Emma, she's completely immobile or she's completely on bed. So when we have a sort of a mobility gallery, we then identify at what risk or where is our patient. And depending on that, we would sort of plan our nursing care, we plan our nursing activities, depending on what is the mobility level of the patient we are caring for. Now, why do we say that this is an ongoing challenge, or why do we always, talk about pressure injuries as an ongoing challenge? Because this remains as one of the largest unsolved medical complications in healthcare. Now, when an individual's ability to reposition independently becomes compromised, that can be life-threatening. And pressure injury is one of the most common and devastating complications, which is as a result of immobility. A sustained pressure from, as we just discussed, mechanical loading, immobilization, remain as key extrinsic factors in the development of pressure injury. Now, as patients' age, acuity, and obesity levels continue to rise globally, the requirement for products that prevent pressure injury, technology, lot more technology coming into force. It's also widely acknowledged that there is a strong economic argument for preventing pressure injuries, because once a patient develops a pressure injury, the subsequent cost for treating pressure injury becomes very high. Now, once, we generally say that we say pressure injuries are considered avoidable and we don't want to have pressure injury. But when a patient develops pressure injury, that there is a lot of, the economic burden behind that is very high. And that is another problem that we generally face. Now, we say pressure injuries represent a significant economic burden also for the healthcare system. Now, when you look globally, now, if we ask, what is our incidence of pressure injury? Many people call me up and say, Sushila, what is the incidence of pressure injury in India? So I don't have any data. I don't have any statistics. Maybe individual hospitals do have their statistics, but generally hospitals don't like to share their statistics. But when we look at a global scenario, there's a lot of evidence, where when we're talking about the incidence and prevalence of pressure injury. Now, globally, pressure injury prevalence in acute care is approximately 14.8%. But it varies from country to country. I don't think we in India have such a high percentage, but yes, we know certain countries which have even higher than that percentage. Now, there are a number of, when we're talking about pressure injuries and we're talking about such a high prevalence rate, obviously the cost for treating, the annual cost burden also increases. Also, we would, there are a number of factors which make up for this cost burden. And when we look, the treatment material, services that you're using, dressing, medication, the nurses and doctors' time, more specialized care, the additional length of stay when a patient develops a pressure injury, the patient is forced to stay for more number of days in the hospital. And obviously, there are litigation issues and all this. So depending on the country, these costs are either absorbed by the hospital or the patient bears the cost, whichever way it is, or it may be insurance that is bearing the cost. But whatever said and done, this is, representing a huge significant burden on the healthcare system. Now, as I said, it's a global healthcare challenge. Now, when we're looking at pressure injuries, when we're talking about it as a devastating complication of immobility, the problem, it's associated mainly with higher mortality rates, longer hospital stay, and costly treatment. International pressure injury prevalence rates are estimated to be in acute care 5 to 27%, in long-term care around 27%, long-term acute care, and in long-term care 3 to 32%. So this is some global statistics that we have when we're talking about international pressure injury prevalence rates. Now, what does it mean to the patient? When we are talking about pressure injury, what does it mean to the patient? Now, there is a global drive that we want to reduce the length of stay, reduce the cost of care. This is what we want, or this is what we are looking to achieve. Now, we say pressure injury is avoidable, or we call it never events. So it should not happen, and we don't want that to happen. Now, the impact of pressure injury, as I said, can be devastating. And does it mean to the patient? It could mean reduced quality of life. It could mean higher levels of pain. It could be loss of independence. It could be reduced physical function. So all these could have an impact, on the patient. The impact is not only on the patient, the impact is on the caregiver, the impact is on the facility. So as I said, for the patient, it may be related to pain and reduced mobility, it may be related to longer stay in hospital, loss of independence, patient will require more support, decreased quality of life, or even death, if it becomes very bad. And of course, for potential for surgical repair, the patient has surgical debridement, skin grafting, etc. To the caregiver, more support is needed. Advanced staging requires extra attention, time, resources. All this is for the caregiver. And when it comes to length of stay, there is less availability of beds. Now, generally, if the patient is admitted only for, or is there only because of a pressure injury, generally we call their bed blockers. So they're blocking a bed where a patient who needs a bed with a more acute care can be admitted. So there is, there can be less availability of bed, cost of treatment, and of course, liability and litigation costs, though not very much in our country, but, in the Western world, litigation is a huge issue with pressure injuries. Every pressure injury is a court case, and, there are a lot of litigation issues. Now, let's come to the main, this was just to catch up on how, how pressure injury can pose as a problem, or how it's an ongoing challenge for all of us. Now, as you know, people are made to move, and we all, right from birth, we are moving. Movement is so important. When an individual's ability to reposition independently becomes compromised, the impact can be life-threatening. And pressure injuries, as we just mentioned, is one of the most devastating consequences of immobility. Now, why is pressure injury so difficult to prevent? Or why are we talking about that, we still have pressure injuries in spite of having all the knowledge, in spite of, doing so much? Why do we still have pressure injuries? Now, there are two main reasons. One is pressure injury development is very rapid. Injuries can develop very quickly with irreversible damage occurring in vulnerable patients within a matter of hours. So it is very rapid. It develops very rapidly. And second is, it is invisible. Inflammatory changes in the skin, and the underlying tissue begin about 3 to 10 days before it actually becomes visible. So sometimes you're not able to see it, or it's not seen in the skin, but there are some inflammatory changes that are happening underneath the skin or within the skin. Underlying tissue is already undergoing some inflammatory changes, which you are not able to see it. Once you start seeing it, or once you start seeing redness, and once it becomes more evident, the damage has already happened. So then you start seeing it. So pressure injury damage can occur quickly. It can become evident on the skin only days after development, and risk assessment tools are key for prevention of pressure injury. However, all these risk assessment tools that we use come with certain limitations. We know that there are certain limitations for all these risk assessment. What are some of the limitations of our risk assessment tool? We have semi-quantitative risk assessment tool, or what we use, and we use that as a standard of care. And it's very important that we continue using it. So we need that. So we have these risk assessment. However, many of these risk assessment tools in clinical use have low predictive value, and they don't always lead to effective prevention of at-risk patients. So many times we're not able to appreciate that. And visual and skin and tissue assessment lack reliability, and it's based on subjective interpretation of the individual, whoever is inspecting the skin. So some of the key limitations for the risk assessment tool is the subjective interpretation. How many times we do Braden risk assessment? You'll see that two people do it in two different ways, so there is a subjectivity element to all these risk assessment tools that we use. It has got a low predictive value, and they don't always lead to effective pressure injury prevention. So these are some of our limitations, but still we are using it, and we use it, and many times, and we say we need to use it, and it helps us. But there are limitations. So these tools do come with some limitations. What are some of the limitations of skin tissue assessment, or STA, as we say? Now, the current, pathway relies heavily on the nurse's judgment, to detect damage below the skin surface. So visual skin assessment, it relies on your experience. Like, for example, when we're looking at a blanching erythema or a non-blanching. So are the nurses able to identify or differentiate between a blanching erythema and a non-blanching erythema? So, the nurse's judgment becomes very important. So visual skin assessment relies on the clinician's experience and ability to categorize pressure injuries. Now, difficulty in identifying blanching erythema in a darkly pigmented skin. Sometimes we can't see erythema. We are not able to identify erythema in a darkly pigmented skin. So that becomes a challenge, when the skin is darkly pigmented. So interpretation of simple descriptors such as patient mobility can be difficult, but most doubt in the interpretation of special risks. So these are some of the limitations even with skin tissue assessment. And many times we are not able to correctly, identify if the patient is, what is the problem with the skin. So these are some of the limitations of risk assessment tools, and also of skin and tissue assessments. So these are some of the limitations that we have, but still we need to do it. We need to continue doing it in spite of all the limitations that we have. Now we have, this is a new, I don't know if some of you are aware of it, but what is happening beneath the skin, and that is what we call a damage cascade, or that is what we're looking at, damage cascade. Now, I'm going to explain to you what is this damage cascade, because the concept of subepidermal moisture will come from the damage cascade. So let's try and understand exactly what is damage cascade. Now, damage cascade, it is a vicious cycle. Now, if you look at, our current guideline also is talking about damage cascade. Now, there was this gentleman called, Amit Giffen, who first identified, in his studies about this damage cascade. Now, what happens in the damage cascade? Now, when you look at the damage cascade, there is a triggering event, okay, which is causing what is known as tissue deformation, or there is deformation of the tissue. The triggering event could be pressure, it could be shear, it could be any internal factors, intrinsic, extrinsic factors. Now, these triggering events, they cause deformation. So there is a prolonged tissue deformation. Now, this tissue, because of this pressure, starts getting deformed. And there is this deformation, tissue deformation, leads to cell damage, and then it leads to cell death. So subsequently, what happens is the cell death at microscopic level starts, beneath the skin surface. And this cell death at microscopic level triggers the inflammatory process. Now, once this inflammatory process gets triggered, the cell death, which triggers the inflammatory process, below the epidermis. So there is an inflammatory process that is triggering below the epidermis. I go to the next slide, and then I come back to the previous slide. Now, when you look at the inflammatory process, I'm sure all of you know what happens when there is an inflammatory change or inflammatory response. When there is an inflammatory response, what happens? There is vasodilation, or there is capillary widening, and then there is an increase in the blood flow. This is, the normal way the inflammatory process, behaves, or this is what happens when there is an inflammatory process that is, kicking in. So there is capillary widening, there is increased blood flow. Because of this, because there is an increased blood flow, there is increased permeability. The fluid starts, or fluids gets released from into the tissues. So there is increased permeability, and the fluid starts getting released into the tissue. So at the tissue level, there is fluid that keeps accumulating. And then, of course, slowly, the extravasation of the leukocytes at the site of injury, and then you start developing symptoms like fever and other things which is related to the inflammatory response. So let me come back to this slide. So you have an inflammatory response there. Now, as a result of inflammatory response, there is vasodilation. Because of vasodilation, there is increase in blood flow. Because of increase in blood flow, there is an increased permeability. Because of the increased permeability, the fluid starts leaking into the leaking out. And when it starts leaking out, it collects into the subepidermal space, or just below your epidermis. It starts collecting just below your epidermis. And then what happens? This fluid keeps collecting and collecting, and then it starts putting more pressure onto the vessel. So there is the interstitial pressure keeps increasing. And once the interstitial pressure keeps increasing, there is narrowing of the vessels, there is ischemia, and the blood circulation gets hampered, and then ultimately the tissue dies, and then you start seeing redness and skin peel, etc. Now, what happens? So that means the process has kicked in right from the inflammatory phase, where the fluid is leaking into the subepidermal space. And when it starts leaking into the subepidermal space, there is edema there. There is edema, there is fluid that is collecting, which is adding on to the interstitial pressure, which is occluding the capillaries, and then ultimately you get tissue death and you get SAPS. Now, at that edema stage, or at that inflammatory phase, you're not able to visualize anything. You don't know what is happening there. You will see it only once ischemia and tissue death happens. Once ischemia happens, you start seeing slight redness, and once tissue death happens, then you see that you will see skin peel, etc. So what happens? What we are trying to see is whether we are able to identify anything at that edema phase. So what I'm going to talk to you about today about subepidermal moisture. That means the moisture that is collecting in the subepidermal space, or just below the epidermis, and how that subepidermal moisture can be identified. Now, if you're able to identify that subepidermal moisture, it means you're able to identify, and you're going to start your preventive measures 3 to 5 days before you actually see any redness. So that may be reversible then. You may be able to reverse the whole process when you start aggressively preventive measures, when you start the preventive measures. So let's see how, let's talk more about subepidermal moisture, and let's see what is subepidermal moisture. The subepidermal moisture, as I explained to you what happens or when the subepidermal moisture comes into place. So this is, it cannot be detected. A subepidermal moisture cannot be detected through visual examination or even through microscopic examination. You cannot see this damage through any of these things. So it is a biomarker. So basically, subepidermal moisture is a biomarker which notifies practitioners of the incipient change. So inflammatory changes in the skin and underlying tissue within the localized tissue edema, it can occur 3 to 10 days before the damage or breakdown of skin is visible on the surface. So what SEM does, or subepidermal moisture, is it is a biomarker which is notifying you that there is a damage that is happening and that you need to take care and you need to aggressively start your preventive management and prevent further damage into the skin. So that is about subepidermal moisture. How do we measure subepidermal moisture? How do we understand if there is subepidermal moisture? We measure what is known as the biocapitance of the tissue. Now, edema is one of the earliest signs of cell death in pressure injuries. That's because of the subepidermal moisture that is collecting. So that edema is detectable via a biophysical marker, which is called as the biocapitance of the tissue. Now, what is biocapitance? Biocapitance is basically, it's an electrical property of the tissue, which varies depending on the level of the interstitial moisture content. So the greater the interstitial moisture content, the higher the biocapitance of the tissue. So biocapitance basically is an electrical property. And if your moisture content is more, the biocapitance will increase. The higher the biocapitance, the higher biocapitance is, once you know that there is moisture and this, we want to measure the biocapitance. Now, the higher biocapitance, you can interpret or you can measure it by using a SEM scanner or subepidermal moisture scanner technology. So that's what I'm going to get into technology. So you could measure this subepidermal moisture by using a scanner that is going to tell you 3 to 10 days before you actually see redness, before you actually see a skin damage, that there is a problem and we need to start intervention as quickly as possible. So changes beneath the skin surface is detected by using an integrated electrode sensor, and that is how we measure the biocapitance of the tissues. So, just give you just again highlight on SEM basically. So visual skin and tissue assessment can lack reliability, and it is based on subjective interpretation, while standard of care with skin and tissue, or STA as we call, detect damage that has already occurred. So when you're doing a skin care or assessment, the damage has already occurred, and of course your RTAs have got limitations. Now, what SEM does is SEM is a biomarker which notifies practitioners that there is a change at microscale and it is highly likely to be reversible. So let's see, how this was derived at. So we look at some of the global guidelines just to put it in perspective. We look at some of the global guidelines. As you know, we have a lot of guidelines, the NPIAP, the EPUAP, the PPIA. These are all our clinical practice guidelines for pressure injury prevention and management. Now, all these three guidelines, what are they talking in the latest guideline about SEM? Now, in the etiology section, of the guideline of the 2019 guideline, it recognizes the critical significance of subepidermal moisture, and it also talks about biocapitance as a biomarker for pressure as pressure injuries develop. So they say biocapitance of the tissue, which is the electrical property because of the moisture that is collected. They say that is a biomarker as the pressure injury develops. Now, they're also talking about in the section of assessment, the guideline says that a focus on early identification may give rise to a demand for early intervention. Clinically proven technologies are available which identify anatomical locations and risk of PU development. And one such example is subepidermal scanner or moisture scanner or SEM scanner that detects inflammatory edema in the tissue. Such devices help to target appropriate intervention for prevention and management. So the guideline, 2019 guideline, is already talking about subepidermal moisture, and it's already saying that you need to use a scanner to assess so that you can prevent the occurrence of pressure injury by early intervention or by actively starting your intervention, the different preventive measures. There are recommendations on the guideline. Recommendation 2.6 says that healthcare practitioners, using their own qualified clinical judgment, consider using subepidermal moisture or edema measurement as a device, as an adjunct to routine skin assessment. So you don't do away with grid, you use this as an adjunct. And of course, it also says that, healthcare practitioners, using their own qualified clinical judgment when assessing darkly pigmented skin, should consider assessment of skin temperature and subepidermal moisture as an important adjunct to assessment strategies. So the guideline very clearly is talking about using a scanner, using a subepidermal moisture or SEM scanner in order to detect the subepidermal moisture early on and initiate your preventive measures as quickly as possible. Some of the clinical evidences that we have gathered now, and there is loads of clinical evidence that are there. We have one major meta-analysis. There is one systemic review, 4 health economic studies. There are some 55 scientific congress posters that are presented, and more than 60 peer reviews. So there's a huge lot of body of, or extensive body of clinical research, which is related to these, to SEM and how it can improve your outcomes. So there's a lot of studies that go behind it. There's a lot of real-world evidence gathered across markets. It said that there is a significant pressure injury reduction across care settings, about 47% in hospice setting, 90% in acute care, and 27% for community care. So these are some real-world evidence that we have. Now, there's one meta-analysis that we did. I just want to highlight on that, and then we go into the scanner. So that meta-analysis was done over 28 sites across 5 countries in 12 different care settings. And the meta-analysis was conducted on a data using words as a unit of analysis to facilitate an overall estimate of pressure injury, pressure ulcer prevention, and a sensitivity study was conducted to assess the sensitivity of the result. Now, the outcomes was all sites achieved pressure injury incident rate reduction, and 6 sites achieved statistically significant pressure injury or incidence reduction, and we had a 3-fold reduction in pressure injury. The recommendation at the end of the meta-analysis was incorporating such an approach for strategic management of pressure ulcers has the potential to enable clinicians to identify developing tissue damage before it is visible on patient skin and employ appropriate early interventions to limit devastating effects of that PU can cause to patients in their care. We are also talking about, and there is an obvious clinical benefit of using SEM scanners technology in clinical practice to reduce incidence of PU in at-risk patients, and the literature points to positive impact that this approach has on the clinical practice, nurse decision-making, and associated financial benefits. So this is what the meta-analysis was talking about. Now let's get on to something about the Provisio SEM scanner. As you know, we have a lot of campaigns, react to red, improve skin, stop the pressure ulcer to zero, a lot of initiatives like the asking tool. We have more than 90 risk assessment tools like Braden, Waterloo, Norton, so many risk assessment tools. This is what we are doing currently, and this is what we do. Now, this along with innovation that is using, so this plus, Provisio SEM scanner will always, help to tackle this pernicious problem that we are facing with pressure injuries. So when we're talking about this new intervention, this required a systemic approach. So we have science. So the science is talking about subepidermal moisture, which discovered an indication of pressure damage, which was confirmed. We using technology. So the device was developed to detect subepidermal moisture and achieved all regulatory approvals. And there is evidence. So we have a significant body of evidence and experience that supports transition from treatment to prevention. So we have, based on science and technology and evidence, we have, this new technology of the SEM scanner, wherein we could identify pressure injuries. So SEM scanner, or what we call Provisio SEM scanner, it's a device which empowers you to with the ability to deliver objective and anatomically specific pressure injury assessment, ensuring a 5-day window of opportunity to deploy a targeted and tailored pressure injury prevention strategy that helps minimize pressure injury incidents and reduce overall cost and time of care. So that's the whole thing about. So you have an objective PI assessment on admission, which and 5 days earlier, regardless of the skin tone. It enables you. It's anatomically, specific. So and it's targeted intervention, and it digitally enhances PI care pathway and outcome. So that's how the scanner looks like. Okay, we'll look at it a little more into detail. What it does. So that's the SEM scan. So it's not bulky. It's a handheld device. So basically, it's the world's first handheld scanner for quick and simple risk assessment. What it does, it provides an adjunct to the existing pathways of PI prevention, such as RTA and STAs. It provides an anatomically specific objective data point opposed to subjective nature of whatever we are doing right now. And it also gives us a window period of 5 days of opportunity. So it helps to detect deep and early stage PI 5 days earlier than visual skin assessment. How does it work? Basically, it uses an integrated electrode sensor to commute the delta value from a set of readings made around a common location. So that's how it works. So basically, what the scanner does is, there is an integrated electrode sensor, and it commutes a data value from a set of readings that is made from a common location. So right now, we scan only 2 areas, anatomically only 2 areas, basically the sacrum and the heel. So there is no electric current that passes through the skin. The SEM scanner measures the capitance between the electrodes, the electrical property of the fluid that's collected. The electrical field is created between the electrodes, projects outward from the plane of electrodes, and when the electrodes are placed on the skin of the patient, and the field projects into the epidermis and the dermis. Now the changes are measured. Changes in the measured capitance are solely related to the changes equivalent to the dielectrical constant of the tissue within the electrical field. The capitance measurement is converted into a SEM scale that the dimensions through which the inherently linear unit of measure conversion is done. So that's how you will see how we measure it. So basically, we've seen the damage cascade, we've seen the inflammatory response, we've seen the biocapitance of the tissue, and we are using SEM as a biomarker. So how do we start scanning it? So this is how the scanner looks like. Now, if you see the green light, that is where you can see the delta there. So that is where you have the delta value. Now, if you have a delta that is more than 0.6, that means there is subepidermal moisture. Okay, so that is what we are, we are talking about. That is the benchmark, 0.6. Now, how to scan? Of course, I will be showing it to you in the video, so you'll be able to understand the scanning technology a little more better when you see the videos. I'm not going to go into all this, but only thing you need to ensure that the skin is is dry and cleaned, and there's you don't put any creams or anything like that, and it's the surface, there is nothing on the surface, so that you need to make sure. We screen the sacrum. So we have 6 points on the sacrum. So basically, from the gluteal cleft, the first point will be the gluteal cleft, then we go above and we go sideways. So we have 6 positions, irrespective. We can start from the gluteal cleft, and then the second on the right side, then the left side, and then you can go up. So, in whichever order you do, these are the 6 areas that you can screen or you can scan on the sacrum. And then we have the heel. When we're talking about heel readings, we have 4 heel readings: the outer heel, the inner heel, the heel pad, and the back of the heel. So we have 4 areas where we can scan in the heel. Now you have to avoid placing the, if the scanner should not be placed on, there is a callus skin or hard skin, you should not place it on that. You can go little more sideways on that case. And if the broken skin, so if the skin is broken, obviously you're not going to scan it. So in order of the scan for each heel, the order is not relevant, but you need at least 3 scans to get a delta value. So you do each scan, and then at the end of 3 scans, you start getting a delta value. Okay, so that is what you're going to read. So each scan, when you see, you can very clearly see where it is being scanned. Okay, and you also have, it's very simple. You just power down and it charges. So you don't need any electrical charging, or, there's a power down hub which you can charge. We also have facility to upload on the gateway. So you could, if you want to use it with your, data, you could upload it on the gateway also. Okay, so before I go into the video, basically the takeaways are, we've seen the science, that is subepidermal moisture. We've seen the technology, that means the Provisio device is to detect the moisture. And we've seen a substantial body of evidence that supports the science and technology. And the value is that you not only, experience improved financial outcomes, but also you will see that you will start your preventive measures very quickly, and you will be aware and you will be mindful. Okay, this patient, we have to be very careful. We may have to reposition the patient. We will have to improve his nutritional conditions. We'll have to, maybe use a support surface. We may have to do a proper skincare. All these things, and we start our preventive measures very actively. Okay, so I just, before I just go into the video, and we'll just have a look at the video, and we'll see a little more so that you'll understand, and then I can take questions.
Provisio SEM Scanner. Provisio SEM Scanner empowers you with the ability to deliver objective and anatomically specific pressure injury risk assessment, ensuring a 5-day window of opportunity to deploy a targeted and tailored pressure injury prevention strategy that helps minimize pressure injury incidents and reduce overall cost and time to care. This video demonstrates the main steps to complete a session with the Provisio SEM Scanner. If you need more information, please refer to the Provisio SEM Scanner user manual or contact your local Arjo representative. Starting a scanning session. Start by removing the Provisio SEM Scanner from the charging hub. The unit should automatically power on. It can also be turned on by pressing the action button. Install the single-use sensor. To prevent cross-contamination of patients, use a new, unopened, single-use sensor per patient per scanning session. Remove the sensor from the pouch and place the sensor on the connector. There is a notch in the sensor and a corresponding tab on the scanner connector to aid the alignment of the sensor. You'll hear and feel a click when the sensor sits correctly on the connector. Press the Next Screen button to continue. The scanner will test the installation of the sensor and then display the mode of operation screen. Pressing the barcode function. Pressing the barcode function will implement full data upload. Use this mode if the patient has a barcoded wristband and the Provisio SEM scanner gateway dashboard is installed on your Wi-Fi network. Press the barcode button on the barcode scanning screen. Position the scanner and use the green light to aim the barcode reader at the patient barcode. Once the scanner has identified the barcode, it will emit a short audio tone and the body location selection screen will be displayed. If the barcode cannot be scanned, you can also manually enter the patient ID. You can also collect the data manually by using the manual charting option. How to scan. Ensure that any surface moisture or matter is removed from the area on the skin being assessed. Select the body area you wish to scan. Apply the sensor head flat against the patient's skin in the area to be scanned with sufficient pressure until the scan is triggered. When a successful reading is taken, the scanner will flash blue and emit a short audio tone. Lift the sensor off the skin. The session circles under the body location will display completely filled in when the measurement is complete. The delta symbol will display a value when 3 readings are taken. A delta higher than or equal to 0.6 may suggest increased risk of pressure injury. The value should be considered in conjunction with clinical judgment. Where to scan. Heel readings. Complete 4 Provisio SEM scanner readings for the accessible heel, 1 heel at a time. Avoid placement of the Provisio SEM scanner on hard or broken skin of the heel, such as a calloused heel. The order of the scan in each heel is not relevant, but at least 3 scans need to be taken for a delta to show. Lateral side of heel. Take 1 reading on the lateral side of the accessible heel, positioned around the calcaneus. Medial side of heel. Take 1 reading on the medial side of the accessible heel, positioned around the calcaneus. Heel pad. Take 1 reading of the accessible heel pad from the back edge of the heel. Back of heel. Take 1 reading on the back of the heel around the calcaneus for the accessible heel. Where to scan. Sacrum readings. Complete 6 Provisio SEM scanner readings at the positions shown in the figure. Start the scanning of the sacrum with reading number 1 as indicated in the figure. Reading 1 is taken just above the gluteal cleft. Readings 2, 3 and 4 are taken equally spaced over the bony prominence of the sacrum. Readings 5 and 6 are taken outside the sacral bone area. Store the readings. Press the Home button to return to the Install Sensor screen. If there's a barcode attributed to the patient, the scanner will save and store all readings taken in encrypted form until uploaded on the gateway dashboard. Remove the sensor. Remove the sensor.
Sushila, we lost the audio.
Yes. Yes.
Jensen, please mute yourself.
Remove dirt and debris. Clean the sides and back.
We lost the audio a little bit. Ms.Sushila, we lost
Yes.
the audio. We
Yeah.
lost the audio.
Yeah, it's done. It's over.
Okay.
All right. So if there are any questions, so
There are questions. Thank you so much, Ms. Sushila. If you can stop sharing, then we can take the questions. There are questions in the chat box also. You can stop sharing. It will be good. Thank you so much.
all right.
Thank you, Ms. Sushila. I think the number of people attending shows that how much they care for pressure injury.
Yeah.
So I really hope that, all these will get translated into actions as well. And thank you so much to you. And thank you so much for the attraction that we have. We had almost 500 and maybe more, because there are a few hospitals with auditorium. So their auditorium is full. So what we see here number is definitely more than that. So thank you so much. And first of all, let me look at the chat box and take those questions first. And I'll come that in a minute, 1 second. So first question is that is only used on the pressure point.
Sorry.
Can I ask everyone to mute yourself, please? Hello? Second assessment, if you just mute everyone. I will remove people if you are not muting yourself, please. Please keep yourself muted. Please do not be respectful of so many people in the session. So, Ma'am Sushila, they are asking that it is only used on the pressure point.
Night admission, No, not night. Yesterday, Uma has taken 22.
And may I request everyone to mute yourself? One second, I'm going to remove some people. Sorry about that. Guys, please, if you are in a Zoom session, please look at your screen. Keep yourself muted. If you want to do your business, please go from the class. Please do not disturb. Geet, Bassnet, please mute yourself. And people who are interested, let them ask question and understand what they want to learn. Thank you everyone. And sorry about Ms. Sushila, sorry about that. And so the question was, can that only be used on pressure points? From the video, I could see not all pressure points, only sacrum and heel is what is recommended, right? You're muted, Ma'am Sushila, you're muted.
Okay, thank you.
Can you unmute, please?
Yes. So basically, right now, it is researched and tried only on these two areas, the heel and the sacrum. Now, there are studies that are ongoing into the other areas also. So right now, the proviso is only looking at heel and the sacrum, which is, of course, one of the major, or these are one of the major areas for pressure injury to develop. So basically, we will not do the scanning unless it is fully researched, tried, and, so right now it is only on the sacrum and the heel. So that is one of the limitations here. So right now it's only on the sacrum and the heel. Of course, going forward, we will see many more areas coming into play. Right now, it's only these areas.
Okay. And I think heel is one of the most,
Yes.
difficult to detect.
Heel and sacrum, I think these are the two major areas,
So next question is about from Rajula. Can we use the same sensor for one patient repeatedly?
No, actually, we don't recommend because the sensor has every scanning session should have a new sensor, because the sensor is a very sensitive, the sensor head is very sensitive and the sensor is also very sensitive. So the recommendation is one sensor per scan per patient.
Can I confirm again, like one sensor per scan in the sense, suppose each time, like in the heel, we are doing it in multiple places. So
Yeah.
you can
So
use it.
that you can do. The 4 areas on the heel and the 5 sacrum for one patient, one scanning session, we can use the same sensor.
Yeah, thanks. Now it is clear. Thanks.
So one question from Chanda, I think you already mentioned it, still I'll repeat. What is the normal value and whether value differ in different areas of body parts?
0.6 and above shows that there is, the risk is more, there is subepidermal moisture.
Now comes the question, most important question everybody wants to know is the cost.
Well, I don't think I'll discuss cost at this platform.
Okay.
Because that there is a variable, there is the sensor cost is different, the scanner cost is different. You know, sometimes we give the scanner to the hospitals and hospitals buy the sensor. So, there are different permutation combinations, so, I mean, if it's
So get in touch with Ms.Sushila.
Yes, yeah, I mean, or any of the local Arjo people, I think anybody would be able.
So I have a question that what happens when patient's skin is edematous? Will that interfere with the reading? If patient is edematous, because the tissue is already.
I don't know whether you mean systemic edema. You're talking about systemic edema.
Yeah, system or patient dependent
So
edema.
basically, so this is more, relating to pressure injury, and it's more relating to edema at microscopic level, So, edema also may show a positive delta, but how relevant it is to pressure injury, it's a different thing because, patient has got a systemic edema. So this is more, looking at the subepidermal moisture, and the pressure, the interstitial pressure that is increasing as a result of subepidermal moisture. So that edema is more inflammatory edema that is happening, and it's not the systemic edema. So what you're measuring is the inflammatory edema, which is happening because of the inflammation. So generally, not recommended for systemic edema. It's recommended more for, identifying, your at-risk patients. Maybe you do a Braden also, as an adjunct. So you do Braden plus Provisio, and to make sure, so Braden is going to tell you, yes, this patient is at risk, but this is going to tell you that already the damage has started happening. So, what you need to do further, so that sort of thing. So this is not for systemic edema, it's more for the localized edema. I hope that answers your question.
No, my question was if patient has got a dependent edema or a systemic edema, will it interfere with the scanner? If we want to check if this patient is going to die, because that's a high risk patient,
Yeah. No, I don't, you will still see the delta value.
Okay, all right. Okay, the other question was that, before all this technology came, we did talk about, we actually feel the pressure points, and if they feel a little, what do you call it? We used to call it that bogginess. I mean, you can feel it. So will this sensor identify before that feeling comes itself? That's what I understand.
Yes, obviously. I mean, that feeling
5 days before.
That feeling doesn't come 3 to 10 days before, it comes just before that redness really happens. So the damage has already happened. That's why you're getting that feeling. But this is more at microscopic level. We are talking about 3 to 10 days, 5 to 7 days before, if you're averaging it out.
Okay. So there are people who want to take this. So no problem. Please send me a message. I will just connect you with Ms.Sushila, and she will connect you with the right representative in the state. So how often do you recommend to use this? That's the one question came from.
Ideally on admission and every day, because, if you have a patient who is bedridden, there is a risk every time. You don't need to do it 3 shifts, but at least once a day, you need to do it.
So one of the things, it's actually a sharing part, is that, over a period of time, there's something that I have realized, and I want to stay on this platform, there are so many people here, is that we do a risk assessment. We do use the Braden scale, but at the same time, we are not doing skin assessment and documenting. Whether there is machine or not, it doesn't matter.
He's the
The skin
scanner.
assessment is,
Non-visualized bedsheet just शुरू होना है.
Hello, can you please mute yourself? When someone is talking, please mute yourself. If you have a question, you can raise your hand and we will call out your name. So, I'm talking about just simply doing a skin assessment when you're turning the patient. And also this misnomer that, every patient needs only 2-hourly turning. As a critical care nurse, I have seen that some of my patients needed every 45 minutes because whenever we turn, we would find the tissues really threatening to break down. So we have to turn them. I'm just sharing this for all the nurses who are here. There is nothing called, the hard and fast rules for all these things. They're very patient specific. Don't you agree with that, Ma'am Sushila?
Yeah, actually, when we talk about 2-hourly turning cycle, I always say 2-hourly turning cycle came from Florence Nightingale, because, she started turning her patients. By the time she reached the last soldier, it was 2 hours. And, this is in the lighter vein, it is said that, if you look at the logic for 2-hourly, there's no logic,
Exactly.
What is the logic for 2-hourly? There's no logic for 2-hourly. Ideally, I would recommend that you need to assess every individual patient. Every patient is different. And you should adjust your turning cycle depending on what are the risk factors you are seeing in a particular patient. And depending on those risk factors, you need to adjust your turning cycle and not stick to 2-hourly. And as you said, many times we use the Braden. We don't do skin assessment. We don't see the tissue viability. We don't see what's happening to the skin. So many times that happens. People, you need to touch, you need to feel. If you, as we said, a darkly pigmented skin, you can't even see redness. Many times you may have to touch, see if there is any pain, any induration, any hardness. All these symptoms you need to assess. When you're doing your back care, when you're changing position, at all these times we need to look at all these things. So there is, we need to assess every individual patient's and you should use your judgment based on that. And many times you may have to use support surfaces which do inflate, deflate, once in 10 minutes, which is pressure relieving. So it is relieving the pressure. So, you are taking care of that aspect of pressure relief. So when you are turning the patient, you are getting what is known as pressure relief. So you have a concept of what is known as pressure reduction when patient is in contact and the interface pressure is reduced. Suppose I don't know whether you can see my phone and my hand.
Yes,
We call this as interface pressure. You can have pressure reduction when you're reducing this pressure. But pressure reduction is not enough for a bedridden patient, for an immobile patient. You need to remove this pressure. Now, how do you remove this pressure? By turning the patient. When you turn the patient, you're removing the pressure. That is what we call as repositioning the patient. Or you can use a support surface that is deflating. If you're using a support surface that is deflating, you're again removing the pressure. So you need to assess the patient. You need to understand, do you need to, do you need to look at the support surface, your turning cycles, your nutrition, your skincare, all these things play a very important role. When we are talking the moisture, when we are talking about moisture, temperature, all these things play a very important role. Even the diet, I think Jyoti mentioned about diet in her comment. I think nutrition is very important. Now, many times, we talk about, we say that patient requires, if you look at EPUP guideline, it's talking about protein, calorie, vitamin, minerals, also talking about water. Many times we, to our bedridden patients who can drink, we don't give water, we give water only with food. We are not seeing that patient, we drink water how much, but do we give patients enough water? So that causes a lot of dry skin, dehydration, all those problems. So we need to assess every individual patient. We need to look at the different parameters, assess, and based on that, you need to plan your care, how you're going to care for these patients.
Yeah, I think a very nice discussion just for everyone. This was not a session to learn all about preventing pressure ulcer. It was more about understanding the new technology that can help you in detecting pressure injury at least 3 to 5 days, even up to 10 days before, if you use it. So that way you can take preventive measures. You know, the lecture of preventing the pressure ulcer will take much longer. You know, it has
Yes.
got so many aspects that needs to be considered. You know, when you come to microclimate, even oxygen, hemoglobin, everything has got a bearing on how the skin is going to behave in a particular patient. But I think it's a very, very energizing discussion. So I had someone's hand up. Sandre, you want to ask a question? Sandre Alfred, if you have a question. If anyone has any question,
See, the damage cascade is the new thing.
yes.
You know, I think that is a new understanding, something we don't generally talk about. You know.
Yeah. And also, I think your asking, you know, the asking,
Yes.
that tool, you know, it used to be asking before, now it is
It's
asking.
asking. Yes.
I think this is something that hospitals can consider
Yes.
along with the Braden scale. You know, it is
Yes.
very important not just to write the Braden score, but understand the skin itself. And this technology, the sensor seems to be a brilliant way of knowing before the patient gets into trouble. And also sacrum and heel being the most common, it is important that, you know, we should be smart enough to use the technology. Thank you so much, Ms. Sushila. Thank you very
Pleasure.
much. And, you know, we're in a fantastic session, and I'm so happy to see this, you know, technology coming to help the nurses to understand their patients much faster, you know. So thank you very much. And thank you for your time, and
Thank you.
continue spreading the knowledge about, you know, preventing pressure ulcer and DVT. These are your two focused specialization over the years, and I know that ask you anything and we will get it. And ladies and gentlemen, that if you have any queries, you all have my number. Message me and I will put you in touch with Ma'am Sushila. Any last minute question? If there is none, thank you so much for being here. And we would all see you tomorrow. And this special request is to all the nurse leaders to join us, because this is a very special session on staffing strategies and what are the innovative thinking that is going on. So really, we hope that you'll join us. Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Sushila ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
your
for
time.
inviting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye.
ma'am. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Bye.